for this video, I want to talk about a recent viewer poll which was done on the website known as Doctor Who TV, which is the 20 worst episodes of Doctor Who's revival. And this has been updated after the most recent series of Doctor Who, Series 14, or for newbies, Season 1. I'm going to have a look at this. I've not read any of the results of this poll, so I've no idea what episodes are going to be included in here, but this is going to include episodes airing between 2005 to now, I guess, and almost 14,000, is that right? 14,000 votes have been cast, and now we have the results. So, without further ado, let's take a look at what is considered by a lot of viewers as the 20 worst episodes of Doctor Who's revival. So, number 20. I'm going to be honest with you. I wasn't expecting this at number 20. Number 20, we've got Rogue. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This shouldn't be here, because I think that Rogue is a great episode of Doctor Who. By no means do I think it is like a masterpiece. You know, there are certain flaws you could argue that it has. You know, a couple of fan wanky moments, you could say, for those people who just know nothing about the lore of the show. I personally liked the fan wank that was in this story. It didn't get in the way too much, because the main focus was on the romance between the Doctor and Rogue. Is it because of the romance people seem to really malign this episode? I really don't know. Is this going to be an episode which is going to be maligned for years to come? I really hope it isn't, because I think that there is a lot of good things that this episode has to offer. And I think to name this among the 20 worst episodes since Doctor Who came back in 2005, I'm going to be honest with you, I completely disagree with this. I'd say out of nearly 200 episodes that we've had since it's come back, I'd say that this fits very nicely in the mid-range to upper mid, if that makes any bit of sense to anyone out there, because there's a lot of good things that this has to offer. I personally liked the romance subplot, and this is coming from someone who never really sees the Doctor as a romantic type of person, but here I think it works. I like the character of Rogue. I like the Bridgerton style setting. I think the story as a whole is a nice romp. I don't think it's a masterpiece in storytelling. You know, you could argue, maybe there's a bit of the plot which is really rushed, but hey, you've got like 45 to 50 minutes to tell the story, so you can only cram so much into the story. And you could argue that the villains are not like spectacular. I'll take that, but just because of those flaws, I don't think that this deserves a bad rep, and I certainly don't think that this deserves, according to this, an average voter score of 5.25. You know, I would be giving this a much higher score right now. I'm not going to be like giving this a full review, because this is a very recent story. I think there's a lot of recency bias on this, so I don't think it's necessarily fair that we're getting these stories in here, because I've not read like the entire list, but having Rogue in here and knowing that Rogue for me was one of the stronger episodes of Series 14/Season 1 tells me that there may be others from this series in this list, which I hope there really isn't, because I did, for the most part, like Season 1 albeit with a couple of flaws, mainly from the end of it. But yeah, Rogue I think is a really good story, and I'm not reviewing it because it's quite a newish story. I think if I was to review this, then it would be a few years time, because I think that's my policy going forward with me doing story reviews on the channel is I'd like to look at stories that are a bit older, and the passage of time has either done it a lot of favors or has made it worse. So yeah, Rogue definitely shouldn't be in the bottom 20, but apparently it is, according to voters on this website. Next up at number 19, we have The Doctor, The Widow and The Wardrobe, with an average voter score of 5.21, and my god, it should be much lower on the list. I completely agree this should be on the list. For me, this is certainly one of the worst Doctor Who episodes ever made. I think it's the worst Christmas special we've ever got since the show came back. I think that it was designed as like a family romp, but instead it just ended up as some sort of nonsensical crap. And I feel that it doesn't help that this comes off the back of a story arc with Series 6, where you have the Doctor disappearing, going into the shadows, because a lot of people in the universe wanted him dead, and he's going to be quiet for a while, and then literally the first scene starts off with a bang. And yeah, you could argue that there's like fun, whimsical bits. It's like a fairy tale, and it's a family sort of story. You have the Arwell family in there, and it's clearly like a rip-off of Narnia, just off the title alone. But yeah, this story never ever did anything for me. It's one of my least favorite stories. I actually did a review of this a very, very long time ago. The video is not up on YouTube at the moment now. I've taken it down. I privatized it for reasons. And from what I remember, from what I said all those years ago, I just remember slating it, and I don't really think my views have changed all that much on this. Like, I get it's a Christmas tale. I might lighten towards it now, just given that time's moved on. But then again, I could also end up hating this much more. I just always never liked this, like even when it came out back in 2011. So yeah, no problem with this being on the list. Certainly a much worse story than the likes of Rogue. In at number 18, we've got Empire of Death, right? And that's got it's got an average score of 5.04. So apparently only around 5 out of 10, more or less. I'll be honest with you, yeah, it's not a fantastic finale by any means. Like Rogue though, there's a lot of recency bias on this, which I think is a little bit unfair. Again, I wouldn't necessarily put this in the bottom 20, simply because, number one, it's just literally come out, a couple of weeks ago. I think the reason why reaction to this has been very negative is simply because of Russell T Davies doesn't stick to the landing with this particular finale. At time of recording this, bearing in mind that there's future stories and future series coming, this is probably his weakest finale. And I get that he went for something different. He went for a different approach. Some of the things worked very well with this finale. I did enjoy this finale for the most part, so I certainly would not be putting this in my bottom 20. That being said though, there's some parts of this which may benefit for people like me, but may be completely alienating to other people. The fact that we have a returning villain from the classic era in Sutekh is amazing, but it's also bad as well, because a lot of people would have seen the cliffhanger at the end of the previous episode and be like, well, who the hell's Sutekh? But then again, if you could flip that over and say, well, it could entice you to go and watch episodes of the classic series like Pyramids of Mars per se. So it's really a mixed bag in terms of a finale. There's a lot of fan wank in there. Again, it just depends on what type of Doctor Who fan you are. If you're a long time fan like myself, then you'll love it a lot more. But then if you're new to it, it's just going to go completely over your head with all the name drops and all the stuff like in the memory TARDIS and stuff like that. And, you know, Sutekh, as I say. The worst aspect about this, of course, is the ending. The day is saved too easily. It's your typical RTD Deus Ex Machina ending. And then, of course, you've got all of the poor nonsense with Ruby's mum, which really left me feeling disappointed. So yeah, in terms of like the finales that we've had since 2005 though, it's certainly not my least favourite finale. I would definitely consider this to be around the mid-range of finales, because there's certainly some that are much better, like RTD's earlier finales from the first time around are certainly much better than this. But I don't think that this is the worst finale in my eyes, and I don't think, despite some of the poor payoffs, this warrants being in the bottom 20. But of course, there are many people which will disagree with me, as evident from this list. It'd be really interesting to see how this would look in a year or 2 years or 3 years time, given that we're going to be getting more episodes in the not too distant future. Now, moving on, we have number 17, The Ghost Monument, which was Jodie's second episode. This had an average score of 5.02, so it's considered slightly worse than Empire of Death. I'll be honest with you, The Ghost Monument is not a monumental story by any means, but I don't think it's monumentally bad. I'd say it's decent. I think it's a fine story. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's like particularly memorable. The only standouts I really remember from this is it showcases a lot of the characters that get introduced in series 11. It certainly showcases Jodie's Doctor a lot more. It feels like a proper introduction to her incarnation, because, you know, The Woman Who Fell to Earth is a regen story, and typically in regen stories you don't really get a sense of what this Doctor's going to be. I'm not just saying that for Jodie, I'm saying that for like a lot of Doctors in their regen stories. You get it a lot with Capaldi, you get it a little bit with Matt Smith, and you get it in David Tennant's first regen story in Christmas Invasion as well. With The Ghost Monument, I think where this episode falls flat is the villains. You have these crappy robot things, and you've got these fucking rags. You've got floating rags. You end up going from fucking tinfoil in old Doctor Who to fucking rags. Typically. It's just typical Doctor Who all over, isn't it? Best scenes for me are easily the stuff at the end with the TARDIS, even though I absolutely despise that console room. It's a really nice scene, and it showcases a lot of what this era is going to look like aesthetically, because ignoring the rags and the crappy robot things, from what I remember, this story looks really good aesthetically, like in terms of special effects. And I didn't really have a huge issue with it then, and I don't think I would now if I watch it now, to be honest with you. So again, I wouldn't put this in my 20 worst episodes of Revival. Now on to 16. Now this I would put in the list, and I would argue that it goes much lower down than 16. We have Sleep No More coming in with a viewer score of 4.97. This episode has a terrific concept. The execution is piss poor. Mark Gatiss is a great writer. He's shown form in previous stories, but this one is one of those where it just doesn't stick to the landing, full stop. You know, you can argue with Empire of Death, it doesn't stick to the landing with the ending. With this, it's like the entire episode just falls apart from minute one, in my eyes. It's about a found footage concept, and then you've got the Sandman, and I was supposed to be scared, and then I was just left feeling bored, really. And I think that's the worst thing with an episode of Doctor Who, because there's some bad episodes of Doctor Who which I can still get some enjoyment out of for the wrong reasons, of course. With this one, I can barely remember it. The only thing I remember is the whole gimmick of it being a found footage episode, and that is it. I think that if it was done differently in a parallel world where everything aligned perfectly, then I think we would be talking about this in a different light, and we'd be considering this to be maybe in the top 20. It's that messed up, and I think that what really slows this down is just how it ended up. I don't think it's necessarily badly written. I don't necessarily blame the director or the actors in this. It's just something doesn't work around this. I think too many ideas were thrown in one go. I think maybe if you save the found footage for another concept, but then had the Sandmen in just a typical Doctor Who episode, then maybe we'd be having a different conversation right now. But because this exists in the state that it does, yeah, I have no issue with this being in the bottom 20, because honestly, Sleep No More puts me to sleep. And trust me, we're not done talking about Sleep No More. I will be doing a review of Sleep No More at some point, so stick around for that and subscribe. Next up we have Once Upon Time, which was part of Flux. This had a user vote of 4.94, and I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I don't really remember too much about this episode apart from it maybe being a filler episode from Flux. But again, it doesn't warrant being in the bottom 20 in my eyes, because I think there's a lot of good things from this. I think a lot of this is about the characters. You get a lot of character building in this, and you know, you get to see the fugitive Doctor in there again. Some nice bits with Swarm and Azure, and then you've got the Angel in there. You know, things are building up slowly. I think that the pace has certainly slowed down. Like, if you remember the previous episode, War of the Sontarans, but I think that's the whole point in the episode. I never really get the hate for this. Like, I don't know why this is in the bottom 20, to be honest with you. Is it just because of the fact that it's a Jodie episode? I'm not sure what the issue is with this, or the Ghost Monument for that matter. Because to be honest with you, we're a few entries in, and to be honest with you, right now I'd say there's 2 stories that I've mentioned which deserve to be here, and then you have the others which I don't think warrant being in there. But again, it's my view, you know. My view is not the definitive view, it's just an opinion, you know, it's subjective. The next one, again, this is also from the same series, Flux. It's Survivors of the Flux, which is episode 5. And yeah, again, this is like more of a filler one. It's just like fills in time. I think you have to remember that with Flux, it had the unfortunate task of giving us a series of Doctor Who in dire straits in the real world because you had the pandemic. And I think for the most part, parts of Flux work and then parts of it don't. Survivors of the Flux, I don't think is terrible, but I can see why some people may think differently about it. But there are quite a few interesting things in this. Again, like, I think it builds a lot on the characters. Like, you get to learn about Tecteun and stuff like that. And you've got like a really amazing cliffhanger at the end. You get all the stuff with Unit as well. But again, like, certainly not bottom 20 for me. Absolutely not. I'd say mid, maybe lower mid. Like, it's not great by any means. It is definitely a filler episode. Next up, we've got Love and Monsters. Yes, the infamous one with the paving slab. That has a score of 4.82. Notice how a lot of these scores are very, very close. Because Survivors of the Flux is like a 0.01 better than Love and Monsters according to the voters on here. I'll be honest with you, when I was much younger, Love and Monsters was something I just completely hated. But as the years goes by, I appreciate what this story was going for. And I'm not sure I necessarily would put it in the top 20 worst stories or episodes of New Who anymore, because I think there have been some much worse episodes which are just the more conventional tales from Doctor Who. This was giving us something different. I think maybe it's because of that fact people didn't really like it at the time, but I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. Yeah, you can argue there's some parts of this which don't really work, but I don't think that means this should be in the bottom 20. So I'm going to say it. I might actually defend this one and say that I think this doesn't deserve to be here. But again, it's just my opinion. It's all subjective. Next one. All right, this does deserve to be here. We've got In the Forest of the Night, or as I like to call it, In the Forest of the Shite. Yeah, you've got that girl in there. Yeah, I just completely hate this story. You've got all this shit in the forest and you've got all of the kids in there. Yeah, not a really good one, to be honest with you. And I don't really care. There's a lot of the characters in here I don't really care about. Capaldi does really good in this. You know, I don't think anyone does any bad in this. I just want to make that clear. I don't want to attack any of the actors. You know, they can only do the best with what they're given. But I think the material that they've been given here is just so poor, and I just think it's not really worth watching. Honestly, you know, I wouldn't even lose any sleep if I was skipping this in a marathon, because, yeah, this is easily one of the worst. So, yeah, I have no qualms with people on that. This certainly deserves all of the dislike that it's getting here. Next we have Can You Hear Me? That's the one with Zellin, isn't it? And yeah, I remember, from what I remember, I've not watched this one for a good while, but I remember not really liking it that much, but I didn't really hate it. I can sort of see why people might not like this too much because of the way it ends, and there's like a couple of ridiculous bits. Like, it's like there's one part where the Doctor becomes like a fucking Jedi. Like, what? So yeah, Can You Hear Me? Like, yeah, it's not great from what I remember, so I'm not really going to argue with that one. I remember not liking it more than liking it. But there was a certain elements in there which I did appreciate, like it tackled mental health, which I think is a really important topic. I just wish that we got a bit more of that developed in later episodes, because it just sort of comes left field in this, which is a real shame. Oh, and of course, how can I forget the ending of this with Jodie and Graham and the whole cancer line? Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah, definitely deserves to be bottom 20. I absolutely despise that scene. Number 10, we've got The Vanquishers, which is the finale episode of Flux. So we've got 3 episodes from Flux here. Jesus Christ. Surprise, surprise, Jodie Whittaker's era is getting quite a bit of dislike. I never disliked this one, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's quite flawed, but it always had a difficult task of tying all the threads of Flux together, across all of the 6 episodes that we had for that series. I don't think it's bottom 20. I don't think it's I don't think it should be in the discussion. I think it's average at best, because there's some good stuff in here, and I think Jodie Whittaker pulls off a great performance in here. There's some ridiculous bits, like with the Sontarans and stuff, like having sweets and chocolate and all that shit, get rid of that shit. You got really cool stuff, like with the serpent and stuff. The ending is a cop-out, though. I will say that it is a cop-out, but a lot of the time it is, let's face it, it's Doctor Who. Number 9, oh wow. So this is a very recent episode, Space Babies. Now, I would argue Space Babies is the weakest episode from Series 14 / Season 1. I think that it has a very strong start. The best thing about this are the 2 main leads, but then as soon as we get the babies, yes, a little bit nightmare fuel. And I think this is one which it can go either way. It can either age really good or really bad, and I think it's going to be the latter. Because I feel like you have a twist just for the sake of it. And yeah, I know, like, the whole thing is like there's always a twist at the end, but I think Space Babies was a sort of weak beginning for the series. But then if you just have your scenes with the Doctor and Ruby in isolation, you've got some good stuff in there. I just think it's just the main meat of the plot with the Space Babies and the Bogeyman. It's such a shame, because I think this had the potential to be such a great opener. It's a real shame that it ended up being episode 1 of season 1, because maybe some viewers didn't come back after this. Real shame. I'm not sure whether I would put this in my 20 worst episodes of Doctor Who, but I can understand more so with this one than like Empire of Death or Rogue, like why people would be putting this here. Because yeah, there was parts of this which were a bit special effects were good, but yeah, some nightmare fuel stuff. Here we go. I knew this episode was going to be here. We've got the infamous Timeless Children from the Jodie Whittaker era, the season finale for Series 12, which of course revealed that there were incarnations of the Doctor before William Hartnell. I've got to say, like, my opinion has really softened towards this through the years. I completely get why this is in this list, because a lot of people really got pissed off from this, and a lot of people are still pissed off by this, clearly, and they've not forgotten about it. I think the idea is a very fascinating one. I just think it's the payoff. We should have a lot more payoff from this, and I think the fact that we are none the wiser pretty much 4 years later is problematic. I think if we had more payoff, then this would be a much more, I think this would be appraised much more, and it might end up having like a Love and Monsters reappraisal in years, and I hope it does, because for what it does the job in telling the story that's on the page. I don't think it's necessarily badly written. I think it's just because of what it does with the lore, and that is why it's ended up pissing off a lot of people. But you know, if it gets expanded upon in the future, then I think hopefully it can change for the better, because I really do think it is a fascinating concept, and I think we should expand on it further now, because this is canon, whether you like it or not. And that's coming from someone who didn't really take to it first time around when I watched it. And yet I've watched it multiple times since then, because, you know, there must be something which brought me back. And it's certainly not because I hate it. Praxis is at 7. I never really I never really disliked it, but I never really loved it either. I just thought this was an average one from Series 12, and I wouldn't put this at 7. I'd say this is like pretty mid, pretty average, yeah. Maybe below average. Pretty forgettable plot. Much better than stories like In the Forest of the Shite. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily put this in the list. Arachnids in the UK. Alright, I can see why, yeah. I wasn't really a fan of this. This was a bit shit. Got a voter score of 3.97. Jesus Christ, so we're getting into the threes now. Number 5. Oh, wow. Actually, let's just go back a sec. Yeah, Arachnids in the UK introduced the Trump-type villain, didn't it? Yeah, he was a prick. And he came back in that Dalek story as well. Oh, why did they bring him back? Fear Her. Not arguing with that. It's a shit story. Yeah. I can't really add much to what has already been said about this. Everyone does the job what's been given in the paper. It's had a lot of memes, mainly just for how ridiculous it is. And yeah, arguably the worst episode out of RTD1. Definitely. The Tsuranga Conundrum. I can actually pronounce that now, because once upon a time I couldn't pronounce the episode because it's such a ridiculous title. Yeah, a lot of people didn't like this one. I think a lot of ideas were thrown into this. It feels like what if a bad 80s episode of Doctor Who was done in the modern day. This was it. If you just like reduce the number of ideas that is on screen, then you'll end up with something better. I think the Bating is like a great little monster, but then you've got all sorts of other subplots going on with side characters, and it doesn't really pay off too much because I don't really feel anything for these characters, and the pacing is like all over the place in this. So yeah, I can sort of see why this is in this list. I wouldn't necessarily put it this low, but I can see why some people are putting it this low. Number 3 is the Battle of Ranskoor Avkolos. Not going to argue. this is probably the worst finale we've got in terms of all the finales we've got so far in the new series. It had so much potential, and yet it gave us so little. I mean, Mark Addy is in this and he's wasted. And then you have the most predictable villain return ever with Tim Shaw. And I don't think he is as compelling as he was first time around in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. And there's like a couple of nice character moments in there, but it doesn't really do enough to warrant being a good series finale. And I could argue that something like It Takes You Away may have worked better thematically for characters like Graham and Ryan, just with the dynamic and everything. And then there's a lot of other stuff like with the 13th Doctor. But yeah, this one is a very poor series finale. And yeah, clearly this has pissed off a lot of people as well. At 2, we have Legends of the Sea Devils. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with this. I might even put this at number 2 or even number 1 because unfortunately this was a disaster. You know, you've got the promise of a great villain from the classic era coming back, and what you end up with is one of the worst stories ever made. Sea Devils are done dirty, and a lot of the writing is just way off. Like, there's some really horrible lines of dialogues like, "Don't touch the swords, they'll kill you." Like, well, yeah, they'll kill you anyway. It's just fucking stupid. And then the editing is all over the place, and the CG is a little bit shit as well. It was a really odd experience when watching this for the first time. And obviously, you know, a little bit like Flux, I understand that the conditions that it was made in was probably a little bit poor because of COVID and stuff. And you could argue, well, at least we got something, but sometimes you got to wonder whether it was worth just not having it all, and we could have just skipped from Eve of the Daleks and then go straight to the Power of the Doctor, because this really doesn't bear any real significance, barring maybe the Doctor and Yaz's relationship. But I can go on a rant about that because I think it was poorly realised, and it was like a bit late in the era when they touched upon it. I think that if it was done much better, then if it was done like much sooner, then I think it would have felt more. And just like a lot of stuff, it just feels like, let's throw stuff at a dartboard, let's bring back a classic villain. Who do people want? Let's bring back Sea Devils, and then where do we set it? Let's set it in the pirate ship, and then let's make it the most garish looking story possible. And yeah, disastrous production, disastrous writing. It's like it's a combination of two bad things right there. And I can't really argue with this verdict from viewers here. And at number 1, according to readers of Doctor Who TV, number 1 is Orphan 55. I don't know if I would put it at number 1. It does go in my top 20 or bottom 20, however you want to say it. It's bad. And like, it's an idea which is recycled from the Colin Baker era with the Trial of the Time Lord. there's not much more for me to say really, apart from Benny. Oh, then you've got like really shitty looking aliens. The dregs are alright, but they don't really do all that much. The best part of this is the Doctor's speech at the end, but I always found it really jarring how she's talking and then she's sort of cut off by the dregs. Like, I get what they were going for, but personally for me, I don't think it really works. But I do appreciate what they were doing at the same time. So yeah, I can't really disagree with this being on the list. I wouldn't necessarily put this at 1, but yeah. Episodes like The Doctor, The Wither of the Wardrobe definitely deserve more dislike, I think. Because at least with this, they tried to build an alien world. I think there's some great concepts and great ideas, but unfortunately there's some bad ones too, and that's what drags this and a lot of other stories down. And it's a real shame that we get a lot of stories in this which are actually from the Jodie Whittaker era. Just looking at this list alone, if I just count, it's like more or less like half of the list is all Jodie Whittaker stuff. I'm really sad that there's 3 stories which have come from Ncuti Gatwa's first series. I think that may change over time, because you could argue there's recency bias there. But for the most part, barring a few episodes which I do actually have a case for and actually think they have some redeeming features, I do agree with a lot of what has been said here. So let me know in the comments what you think are some of the worst episodes, and keep it nice and civil in the comments. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this. Have you read this? Do you agree with all the views on this? Would you change this? Like, I would love to know what your top 10 are. They could be completely left field stories as well. They could be stories which you may think are completely overrated, and some people think they're amazing, and actually no, they're piles of shit. I would really love to know. So let me know in the comments. And that does it for now.